From the East Texas Sports Network studios, powered by Texas Dairy Queen, a tradition of excellence, the ETSN podcast, where Clint Buckley and Mike Graham offer their, well, they just talk. But who really cares? It's what they do best. It's the lowdown on everything high school football in East Texas. And now, Clint Buckley and Mike Graham.
Six teams are now one win away from playing for a state championship at AT&T Stadium in Arlington. We could have as many as 5 teams there next week. How many East Texas teams are going to go? We'll find out in a couple of days. Welcome to the ETSN.fm podcast. I am Clint Buckley, and I'm joined as always by Mike Graham. How's it going, Mike?
Going good. I'm excited. 6 teams playing for 5 state championship games. It's going to be a great week, and I'm just excited to see how it plays out Friday and Saturday.
Well, let's get right to it. We have 6 games on the docket for this week, and we'll start with the smaller classifications in the 2A Division II state semifinal featuring Tenaha and Bremond. These 2 teams have history in the playoffs. Tenaha has only lost 4 games in the postseason since 2009. One of those came to Bremond back in 2010, and these 2 teams played each other in the state quarterfinals a season ago, with Tenaha earning a 24-7 win. You talk about Tenaha, you have to start with Kobe Caraway. He's over 2,000 yards. He did have his streak of 5 straight 200-yard rushing games cut short end last week against Iola, but he still came up with 180 yards and 2 touchdowns, so not a bad game by any stretch of the imagination for Caraway. Bremond's offense funnels pretty much everything through their sophomore quarterback, Rashawn Paul, who enters this week with over 2,500 total yards of offense, and he's accounted for more than 30 touchdowns. I was able to see some highlights of him on Huddle, and he looks like he's a pretty good athlete, and Tenaha's going to have its work cut out for him, chasing him around all night long. The one thing that Bremond has that could give Tenaha some trouble is they have really good size, and they're really athletic and good production up front. I think their defense as a whole has combined for 93 tackles for loss on the season, and that's a huge number.
Yeah, that's unreal.
And that's kind of been their MO. They've been able to stop drives that way. I mean, you talk about negative plays; those are almost like penalties. They can wreck drives. On 1st and 10, you get thrown for a 3 or 4 yard loss. All of a sudden, it's 2nd and 14. You have to start thinking about putting the ball in the air, and then that's not what you do. So that could have a big impact on the game is how well Tenaha's offensive line handles Bremond's defensive front and makes sure that TJ Thomas, the quarterback, stays clean, and that Kobe Caraway has a few holes to get sprung on big runs. But there's one common opponent between these 2 teams, and it's Hubbard. Bremond beat them 20-6 back in week 3. Obviously, a lot's changed since then. That was way back in September. Tenaha's game with Hubbard is more recent. They earned a 40-26 win in the area round a couple of weeks ago. The score is not indicative of how that game went. I believe Tenaha was up 3 scores in the fourth quarter, maybe 33-12 or something like that. Bremond gets a couple of Hubbard gets a couple of onside kicks, and then they try one at the very end of the game when they've just cut the deficit to 1 score. A Tenaha kid picks it up and goes for the touchdown, so that kind of seals their fate. So Tenaha was tested last week by Iola. 35-28 was the final score. I feel like if there's one East Texas team that's in trouble this week, it could be Tenaha, because Bremond, they've been rolling. They're undefeated. They've been state ranked for most of the season, and they have history. They have playoff history. They've been a deep playoff participant for a few years now. So. This has the potential to be a good game, could go either way, but I would caution Tenaha a little bit this week. I think they could be in trouble.
Right, I think you're right. I'd put Tenaha as the underdog in this game, but a few bright things for them is their own quarterback, TJ Thomas, has had a good season. I think he's passed for about 1,500 yards and has a really good receiver in DeAndre Thomas. And when you've got an opponent that likes to funnel everything through their quarterback, that means there's really only one player you need to stop before they get out of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can contain Rashawn Paul, you're in good position for this game. The only problem is no team has been able to do it so far.
Yeah, I guess it's the same thing for Kobe Caraway. I mean, you're talking about 2 great players on each team, and I guess whichever defense does the best on the other team's superstar, I guess, has the best chance to win the game. Going back to TJ Thomas, the quarterback, you mentioned, you bring up a good point. While obviously Tenaha runs the ball more than they throw it. I mean, it's 75% almost run. Thomas has shown the ability to hurt teams downfield in the passing game. And I think Bremond, we're going to see a lot of 8 and 9 men fronts gearing up to stop the run for Tenaha. And TJ Thomas is going to have to take advantage of some of those one-on-one, single coverage matchups down the field. And if he does that, it could be a big night for Tenaha. That's, I think, a lot of what happens Friday night rests on TJ Thomas' shoulder, because you kind of know what you're going to get out of Kobe Caraway, and you know that Bremond's going to pour all of their efforts into stopping him defensively. So if TJ Thomas has a good game, I think Tenaha's in good shape. If he struggles, I think you got to give the edge to Bremond.
Right. You don't want to get away from the girl you brought to the dance, which is the rushing game. But if you can establish your passing game later in the game, they're not going to be able to gamble by bringing everyone up on the line to contain Caraway. So that could open him up late in the game, and that's who you want to give the ball to late in the game.
Definitely. So Tenaha Bremond, 7:30 Friday kick from SFA's Homer Bryce Stadium in Nacogdoches. Now on to Class 2A. Or Class 3A Division 2, we got a matchup between Newton and Blanco. And this matchup, the dynamics are similar to the Tenaha-Bremond game. You talk about Newton, they're a 3-loss team. Of course, they're playing a lot better now than they were at the beginning of the season. And then you got Blanco, a team that's undefeated and state-ranked, in and around the top 5 for most of the year. Newton's been great in the playoffs, and really over the last couple of months of the season. And you talk about Newton, and you talk about their dynamic rushing backfield with Caleb Foster and Jace Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, that's a duo that's combined for more than 2,700 yards on the ground. And they've got Ronnie Elam playing quarterback, and that's always a good thing.
Yeah, A&M commit at quarterback, no big deal.
Yeah, but you look at Blanco, and they're a scary team because they've just mowed over opponents through the whole season, 14-0, right?
Right, yeah.
They're good. I do like Newton's defense, and I like the fact that they've been tested, especially early in the season, because we thought that Newton could be in this position late in the season, but at the beginning of the year,
it didn't look too good. No,
well. And you had to tap the brakes on that a little bit, and here they are. They've formed as a team and mowed over some pretty good teams of their own during this playoff run and back to district play. Yeah,
I think the big turning point for them came right before district began. They played West Orange Stark, who is in the state semifinals, a class up in Class 4A, and Newton beat them. And they've been rolling ever since. They took care of Corrigan Camden, just kind of blew them out 40-14 in district. And we mentioned their defense. They held Rogers, a pretty potent offensive attack, to 7 points a week ago. Held Franklin in check 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, the strong defensive teams those were too.
Yeah, so Newton's playing well on both sides of the ball. I would give a slight edge to Newton because I think that they're just by athlete volume, I think that they're better than Blanco as far as athlete for athlete. But we've seen this before, that's not always the determining factor in games like this. It comes down to turnovers. It comes down to field position. And in a close game, we'll see how Blanco responds because, like you mentioned, they haven't been involved in too many close games this year, while Newton has. So that game kicks off 7:30 Friday from Waller ISD Stadium in the Houston area. Now on to the other end of the Class 3A Division II bracket. We could have an All-East Texas State Championship game if Wascom can take care of Sonora. This game kicks off Friday night, 7:30 from Glen Rose. Our key contributor, Anthony Hawthorne from ETSN.fm, is going to make the long drive out there for that.
Yeah, beautiful nuclear plant out there.
Yeah, and don't they have something to do with like dinosaurs, like fossils?
Fossil Ridge. It's a nature preserve.
Yeah, I remembered that. I did pay attention one day during geology class in college. And I do remember Glen Rose and dinosaurs going together somehow. I can't remember. I couldn't remember exactly why that stuck with me, but that makes sense.
Yeah, I took a field trip there in 4th grade. It was a lot of fun, except I got in trouble on the way home.
Yeah. Well, Wascom's not going there for a field trip. They're going there to take care of business. And you talk about Wascom's rushing offense right now. What they've done the last 2 years, especially on the ground. I mean, last season they had 4 1,000-yard rushers. I don't know if they're at that point quite yet this year, but that doesn't take anything away from what they have in their backfield. I mean, you talk about Kevin Johnson, Junebug Johnson, Chan Amy, Trace Carter, the quarterback, Dylan Benton, the fullback. I mean, they've got options galore in the backfield. It seems like it's a different guy every week. I mean, last week it was Kevin Johnson. The week before that it was Junebug.
Yeah, they definitely have, it seems, an athletic advantage in this game when you've got 5 guys that can carry the ball like that. Not to mention their defense is playing really well, and you just look at where they play. I'll get into this a little bit more in the next game, but Region 1, Region 2 games are pretty wild. They're just as often blowouts as they are thrillers. But Sonora did beat Cisco last week, and Cisco, the defending state champion, looked pretty good through the whole season. So
yeah, ranked number 1, wire to wire.
Yeah, that was a major feat. You've got some details on that game.
Yeah, Cisco. We talk about Cisco. I saw them in person last year in the state championship game against Refugio. The team that beat Wascom, pretty handily the week before in the semifinals, and I thought if Cisco had won that game last week, that they would probably be favored against Wascom this week. But obviously, that's not the case. Sonora gets a crazy win last week against Cisco. Cisco holds on is up by a touchdown, up by 7 points. Sonora gets a touchdown. They cut it to 1. They're lining up for the PAT. The kicker gets roughed on the point after attempt, so they move the ball up to basically the 1 yard line. Sonora opts to go for 2 and the win, and they get it. They win by 1 point. It was either 36-35 or 37-36. I'm not quite sure, but Sonora did. They knocked off Cisco, and that's worth something.
Yeah, that was a big favor for 3 other teams because.
Yeah, I don't know.
Cisco.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody was feeling all that great about playing Cisco in the state championship game, especially after what they did last season, but. I'm going to give Wascom the edge just because I think Wascom is playing really well right now. And, of course, they have that memory of losing in this round a season ago. And, we talk about Glen Rose and dinosaurs and fossils and field trips. Wascom's not interested in any of that this week.
What about the nuclear plant?
No, I think they're going in there and they have one goal in mind, and that's walking out of there with a win and getting to AT&T Stadium next week in Arlington. So
we're leaning toward an East Texas Super Bowl.
Yeah,
game.
we are. Wouldn't that be something? 2 straight years. I mean, of course, Kilgore Carthage last season, and then if Newton and Wascom both happen to win this week, we'll have it again next week in Arlington. So.
I just marvel about that matchup too.
Yeah, great athletes on both sides of the ball. Yeah, that would be fun watching Newton's defense try to contain Wascom and their speed merchants in the backfield.
Yeah, that's made for TV.
Yeah, and it'll be on TV. So good luck to Newton and Wascom. We'd love to see those two face off next week. Now on to Class 3A Division 1. How about those Mineola Yellow Jackets? Huh? 0-3 to start the year. They've won 11 in a row. They're in the state semifinals for the first time ever. You've seen their last 2 games. They got shallow water this week. What should we expect?
Well, I think that Mineola's proven itself as a team that's going to survive long term, and they have. And this is going to be their first state semifinal in school history. And I think they've drawn a favorable matchup here. You look at shallow water; they're a spread team just like Mineola, and they lean to running plays out of it just like Mineola. But their quarterback is kind of limited because he is 5'6" and 140 pounds. So when he wants to throw, he's trying to move outside of the tackle box, so he's got a clear line of sight to throw because he just can't see over the line. Right. So I think that the key for this game is collapsing the pocket down and not letting him escape. And he'll either have to heave or throw, or heave or run for short gains as that pocket comes in on him. And Mineola's got the weapons to do that. I mean, Trevor Keener and Juan Vargas are 2 of the top 4 tacklers in East Texas now. That the defense as a whole has put up more than 55 tackles for loss. They've done good in the sack department as well. I think that they're going to be a really good test for shallow water. And some cool things about this game is Mineola is actually going to. By the time this podcast goes up, Mineola will have left for Brownwood. They'll practice at Early High School, which is Brownwood's sister city, on Thursday before the game, and then they'll play. And the round trip is 500 miles for them, so 250 miles one way, the longest trip of any East Texas football team this season.
Yeah, excuse me. And you have Mineola, a team that kind of seems to be that team of destiny right now. You talk about the things that transpired last week. I mean, they get a couple of goal line stands in that one.
Yeah, more luck. One time facing a something in goal situation, Pottsboro tried to direct snap to their fullback, and that was a failure, and Mineola recovered. Then they got down to the 1-yard line again later in the game, and a bad handle on a snap cost them that possession, and Mineola ended up capitalizing on that for the game-winning score. And not only that, they got 2 fourth-down stops in the game and forced 2 punts. So it's a defense that's good. And when you've got Jeremiah Crawford and Chance Perkins running your offense on the other side of things, both sophomores, good things can happen on a play's notice.
Yeah, so that ought to be interesting. Mineola Shadow-Water, you'll be there Friday night, 7:30 from Gordon Wood Stadium in Brownwood. Should be a lot of fun. Now on to Class 4A Division II, and you want to talk about traditional programs? We have them. Gilmer versus Salina. That's Friday night from Ford Stadium at SMU in Dallas. Salina has won 7 state titles in their school history, and 6 of those have come since the 95 season. However, they haven't reached the state championship game since 2008, and some of you may remember that year, Carthage and their outstanding running back, Dwight Smith, kind of ran roughshod on Salina in that game, and it was the final high school game ever played at the old Texas Stadium.
Yeah, I took a date there. I was at
Oh,
that
did you?
game. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. How romantic.
Yeah, I know. Well, we'd been together for a while. She cared more about the drill team than the game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So she wasn't walking out of there saying, "Oh my God, Dwight Smith! I can't believe how great a player he is."
Nah, she was a little old for him.
All right. Well, Gilmer. You talk about Gilmer, and they're just ultra athletic. I don't know how many teams, or if there are any teams in Class 4A that can match them athlete for athlete. You talk about Chris Boyd, Blake Lynch, the quarterback McLean Carter has an absurd touchdown to interception ratio, 40-2. One of those came last week, and you almost don't want to count it as an interception because Gilmer scored a touchdown on the play. So, but yeah, I mean, they have a ton of weapons, and it's not just those 3 guys. I mean, they have Jamel Jackson, who's a nice back, and then you have other receivers like Nick Smith and Quinn Fluellen and Chase Tate. Chase Tate is a little lightning bug. You know, he's so small and compact, and they use him in so many unique ways on offense. You know, he runs a lot of the jet sweeps. He's great in the open field because he's so fast. He's very elusive. He's small, so it's hard for defenders to get their arms wrapped around him, and he's got that low center of gravity. So he's a tough matchup in the open field.
And
for
lots
sure.
of experience, 59 varsity games.
That's right. And then Chris Boyd is right behind him at 58. These two kids have been doing it for a long time at Gilmer, and they were both on the state finalist team a couple of years ago when they lost to Navasota. That was a bitter pill for those Gilmer players to swallow, and you know that they're looking forward to getting back. And I think that they have an excellent shot this week against Salina. Salina. They have a good player. They have good players. I don't want to discount that. I just don't know if they have enough to stay with Gilmer for 48 minutes.
Right. They're extremely disciplined. They come from a winning program, and I think that something has to be said about the momentums programs can establish just when they get to this point so frequently in a decade. But running into a Baylor commitment in Blake Lynch and one of the last remaining blue chip prospects out there in Chris Boyd, and then you've got McLean Carter, and then that excellent supporting high school cast. I think they're outgunned in this game, especially offensive. I do too. Offense to defense.
Yeah, I do too. I'll be there at 7:30 Friday from SMU. Now on to the last matchup of the week, and what a way to close it out on Saturday afternoon. John Tyler and Aledo. John Tyler is in its 3rd semifinal in the last 4 years, and of course everyone knows about Aledo. They won 3 straight titles from 2009 to 2011. They won the championship last season, kind of an historic year. They set the state single-season points record in the process, just blowing teams away. Different Aledo team this year, obviously, because a lot of teams are giving John Tyler the edge in this game. You've seen their last couple of playoff games. Is John Tyler a favorite?
I think so. I mean, they've got the athletes to do it. You look at their past 2 games, playing really good teams and just smoking them at the start. I mean, against Rockwall Heath, built up a 21-0 lead. Against McKinney North, built up a 20-0 lead. I mean, if teams want to keep spotting John Tyler points, whether they're not scoring or giving up the ball on turnovers, they'll take it and they'll win because of that. Aledo is a team that I would be very concerned with because they haven't shown a lot of weakness, even though people say they're not as good.
They're bagging. I think it's unfair because they're trying to compare them to last year's team.
Right, and they lost 1 game to a California team, and that's their loss of the season.
Right.
So.
I mean, people want to look at they're not blowing out teams the way they did last year. Well, I mean, that team is going to go down as one of the best ever in Texas high school football history. I don't think you're not doing this team a disservice by holding them up to last year's team, which kind of set the standard. So I think John Tyler has an excellent chance in this game, but I will say this about him. I don't think they're going to take Alito lightly, and I don't think you should. I mean, they've won 4 state titles in the last 5 years. I mean, they're one of the best programs out there, and I don't think John Tyler is gonna walk in there, expecting to dominate the way they have throughout the playoffs.
Can you imagine the Ryan Newsom-Ike Warren matchup?
That's going to be great, right? Isn't it? I mean, Ryan Newsom, he's one of those guys that has tons of offers, and Ike Warren, who doesn't have the offer sheet that Ryan Newsom has, but you'd be hard-pressed to find a better defensive back, at least in the East Texas area, than Isaac Warren. He is committed to Purdue. And it'll be interesting because a lot of teams in the playoffs have kind of not thrown his direction. I think his reputation has preceded him in these playoff games, and that's a big asset when you have a cornerback that can kind of neutralize a playmaker out on the edge.
Yeah, and then you look at the rest of their secondary with DeAndre Williams, Bryson Gibson, and Jordan Owens, who has 4 interceptions in these playoffs. I mean,
yeah,
it's kind of a no-win situation for teams. You got to pick your poison, and Alito pretty well balanced. They will be throwing against these guys, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and John Tyler, and we referenced it. If you're Alito, you can't get JT rolling early, or it's going to be awfully tough to come back. John Tyler has shown that when they get teams down early in the game, it's like sharks. They smell the blood in the water, and they're not going to stop. And I think you look at John Tyler, what they did offense last week. I mean, over 700 yards in the 4th round of the playoffs. I mean, how often does that happen?
Yeah.
I mean, they're clicking right now. I mean, and they were balanced too. They had well over 300 both rushing and passing. Jeremy Wilson, what can you say about that guy? I mean, he's 284 yards shy of tying Earl Campbell's school record for rushing yards in a season. And how ironic would it be for Jeremy Wilson to surpass Earl Campbell, just given those two men's size?
Right. Didn't Jeremy Wilson the other day joked, yeah, two of my legs are one of his.
Exactly.
But Jeremy Wilson is a heck of a player, and I feel sorry for him because I think he's starting to get flustered by this recruiting process that no offers come in yet, and that's really bad because I think he could add a lot to not only just a mid-major program but a major program. You kind of know where his floor is, and there's a lot of upside there.
People want to look at his size. I mean, yeah, he's small. I mean, he's 5'6", and somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 to 160, but he makes plays. I mean, he's making plays deep in the playoffs against elite competition. He had a career-high rushing yards last week, a career-high in carries, and he's right on the doorstep of 2,000 yards rushing. And for a guy that small to be doing that, I mean, that tells you an awful lot about who he is as a football player. It goes beyond size. I mean, we saw him at the Combine back in June, one of the best all-around performers at that event. He had the fastest 40 time there, 4.41, a verified laser, 4.4140, the fastest there. And then what he was able to do strength-wise on the bench press, he put up 10 reps at 205 pounds, one of the best performances by the running backs as far as the upper body strength. And then the lower body, he was the 5th best Kaiser squat there among running backs. So talking to him yesterday, I could tell, even though he was saying all the right things, I could tell he's frustrated by the whole recruiting process. But at the same time, he knows he can't control his size. The only thing he can control is what he does on the football field, what he does in the weight room, what he does in the classroom. He even said as much during our interview earlier in the week. So I think John Tyler is a favorite. I tend to agree with you. That being said, I don't think there's any way John Tyler dominates Alito the way they've dominated their last few playoff teams.
Right, and this is a big game for John Tyler. If they advance, they get to play on TV. That could certainly help Wilson's case.
Exactly.
And a few other guys. A guy that Jeremy Wilson reminds me of. If teams are too afraid to take him as a running back because of his size, he could play inside receiver. Reminds me a lot of Texas Tech's Jakeem Grant, who's about the same size, same speed, and moves a lot in the same way. And speaking of Texas Tech, they offered Damian Miller on Wednesday.
That's right. The first
sophomore.
The first 2017 recruit in East Texas with an offer. So congratulations to Damian Miller. Having seen him come on lately in the season, he's had a great playoffs. He's got great size for someone his age, 6'2", 185. Some folks are already comparing him to Fred Ross, who was a part of the 2013 class at John Tyler, who's having a pretty solid season at Mississippi State right now. If you're getting compared to Fred Ross this early in your career, I mean, he doesn't even have a license yet. He's 15 years old, looks about 30, but he's 15. And the future is obviously bright for Damian Miller, and we should expect good things from him again this Saturday.
Right. He enters the game with a team best 8 touchdowns, and he's the third leading receiver with 567 yards, and he only has 26 catches.
And most of that's come late in the year.
Yeah.
So he's really playing well right now. Speaking of playing well right now, we'll segue into our offensive and defensive players of the week, and we'll stick with the John Tyler Lions and their quarterback, Gio McAllister, who was our offensive player of the week. Just a career performance for him the other night. You witnessed it in person. 16 of 24, 349 passes, or 349 yards, 5 touchdown passes. The yards and touchdowns are career highs. And he also ran for 124 yards and a touchdown. So 473 total yards, 6 touchdowns accounted for. Congratulations to our offensive player of the week, Gio McAllister.
Yeah, he's another guy that could really benefit from TV if he wants to field more offers before signing off with Central Arkansas.
Exactly. He's a big kid.
And I think the same can be said for our ETSN Defensive Player of the Week, and that's Mineola's Trevor Keener, who had 18 tackles and 2 major stops factored into both of the 4th down stops in Mineola's 14-7 win over Pottsboro. And gosh, they needed every single one of those stops because one came on the Mineola 10-yard line on 4th and 1, and the other came on 4th and 10 from the 29. He got a tackle for loss and a sack, respectively, on those 2 plays. And it was tough to pick him because Juan Vargas had 22 tackles in the game-winning interception. But to get to that point, Keener had to get those 2 stops, and he did. So he's a good player. I hope that good things happen to him. I hope someone takes notice of him.
So congratulations to Gio McAllister from John Tyler and Trevor Keener from Mineola, our offensive and defensive players of the week. So before we get out of here, we want to let you guys know that we have previews up for the 6 state semifinal games, 2 of them up already. We have Tenaha and Bremon's preview, and then we have also the preview on Mineola Shallow Water. So if you're interested, check that out on ETSN.fm. If you have any questions or comments for either one of us, you can hit us up on Twitter. I'm at Clint Buckley, and Mike, you are at?
I'm Mike_ETSN.
There you go. So if you have any kind of tidbit for us, whether that's a question, a comment, or even a complaint, we welcome everything. So we want to wish all the East Texas teams the best of luck this week. It doesn't get much better than spending a weekend at AT&T Stadium in Arlington the weekend before Christmas. So we're hoping to see all of you guys out there next week. Until then, have a great weekend, and we'll talk to y'all next week.